believe we're live, according to OBS, Open Broadcast Studio. What's up, y'all? It is Tay from the Beginner Drawing Course. Today we're just going to be sketching, kind of trying to reconnect to the drawing habit, and for me it's been a little bit slow, so what I'm doing is setting up streams so I can have some more accountability, make it more fun. And we'll see if we get anybody in the chat. I know it's impromptu. There's like no advertising of the stream really, but it could be a good time. So I'm just going to be here constructing figures, kind of sketching and studying. And yeah, if the stream ends abruptly, it's because I'm kind of on storm watch. I live in Florida, so it's storm season. And if things get a little too spooky and stormy, I'll just have to cut the stream short. But I plan on streaming for anywhere from an hour to 2 hours of just kind of drawing, going over the fundies, things of that nature. I'm watching the chat on the side here, so you guys can let me know if the audio is good, if the video is good, if things are working. This is why it's kind of the alpha stream, is because I'm just getting this set up. I've never streamed sincerely, but I figure it's a good time to start. So be doing that. Just kind of watching the storm here. We'll see if it's going to be spooky or not. Anyway, yeah, so I got my reference up on my iPad, which you all cannot see. And I'm just constructing some shapes here. Like heads and portraits and figuring out proportions and things of that nature. Flipping the canvas to do so. I think I'll make this head a little bigger. The face is a little tiny, so we'll scale that on up. And the jaw is just a little weak. Okay. And that's decent. So yeah, I've been out of the drawing habit for a couple months now as I've moved to Florida, and I was working full-time as a social media marketing manager as opposed to a freelance illustrator and concept artist. Just pays way better, and I just didn't want to go the same route I was going in terms of just freelancing, you know, having no insurance and things like that. Not a smart way to live. So we are now in Florida, employed as a marketing operations specialist and trying to get our groove back with art. So, thus the stream. I don't see anybody in the chat yet, but I'll just keep kind of talking here. Yeah, so what I'm doing is just going back to the basics, constructing of heads, trying to find proportions that I enjoy in that regard. They're not terribly detailed. It's more about the construction at this point, getting the proportions down that I'm here for, meaning I just kind of like the way that they sit, the relative shapes and measurements of one aspect of the drawing to the next. And just kind of working. Hey y'all, I see people are coming in. Aaron Brown, what's up? Hello from the Netherlands. Glad to see you tuning in. Hello from the US. Napur, I hope I'm saying that correctly, from India. Hi, hello, how's it going, y'all? Just here sketching, doing some character studies. You can see they're very sketchy at the moment, but we'll see if I feel like cleaning them up today. Again, I'm kind of in a very gestural phase right now as I reconnect with the craft. I recently moved from one state to the next and got myself set up, but I've just had trouble staying consistent with drawing or finding a focus with drawing. So I figure streaming might help, might be a good way to get the juices flowing again, even though I am rusty. So how you guys doing today? Hope everybody's having a good... Oh, draw and speak at the same time. Hope everybody's having a good time. That's a great question. They definitely both suffer in some regard with the multitasking, but I've been drawing a long time. I'm going to be 33 this month, and I've been drawing approximately since I was 8, but studying it sincerely since I was about 19. So talking and drawing has kind of come natural to me because I went to art school and me and my friends would just barely look at each other, but we'd be in our sketchbooks. So that's kind of how I learned to draw and talk at the same time. I'd say probably for about 10 years roughly. Teaching helps a lot with that, although again, I can definitely feel a drag on my drawing abilities and on my speaking abilities. Um, but it's like anything else, it's practice. There's obviously tips and tricks as far as developing it. For example, drawing way in your comfort zone is a great way to be able to still chat and draw. Otherwise, you're kind of stretching yourself. And I mean, we're like computers in that we have kind of random access memory, or RAM, I kind of think of it like that. And if you're doing stuff that requires a lot of RAM, it's hard to speak in an articulate way while you're doing it. But I've drawn lots and lots of characters. If I'm sitting here like doing vehicles in perspective, or studying animal anatomy, then probably would have a rougher time being able to draw and chat at the same time. But yeah, right now I'm just deep in the comfort zone. At least I'm trying to bring the comfort zone back. Again, it's been a little bit, so let me just save this real quick. Character sketches. But yeah, any questions you guys have, I'll be happy to answer. Maybe give a tiny demo in the midst of these sketches here. Otherwise, I'll just kind of talk over what I'm doing, what I'm thinking. So obviously right now, it's very constructive, very much just about getting things where I want them proportionately and in terms of the overall shape design. I recently, the more you draw, the less RAM you use, yeah. Basically, and especially the more you draw in your comfort zone. You'll notice that instructors, people who are used to drawing and talking, they have go-to stuff they always draw. And even when you're looking at people on Instagram or whatever who draw kind of the same thing over and over, you kind of find your areas of genius or your specialist zones. And for me, it's a lot of character stuff. It's a lot of creatures and monster designs, typically in fantasy, sci-fi kind of spectrum. Full-on illustrations, those are probably a little harder to chat and do at the same time. Like this dude's posture is not my favorite. Let's try and alter some of this real quick. So you see I'm just like lassoing these areas, and I will go in, make some pretty big adjustments. Because these are just sketches, this is like the first version of what I'm doing. I know that I'm going to draw this over again. So what I'm really wanting out of it is to be able to get everything in place, all the big stuff. Because it's not easy to draw this right the first time. You can do it. Artists can do it, but I like to build my drawings up iteration after iteration. You can probably supersede some of that if you spend more time visualizing what you're going to draw before you draw it. Every little detail, thinking about, okay, well, this strap connects here, and this is the general proportions of the figure. But also drawing on the fly is more about, laying something in and responding to it. It's a bit more like jazz that way as opposed to classical music. So I guess it's more like improv. But I've drawn these characters quite a bit over the years as well. I recently finished the first draft of a piece of fiction work, a fiction novel, and I am trying to create like a nice art pack I can send to literary agents as well. So kind of stand out a little bit from the usual submissions. And these are some of the characters from that book. The book is entitled Guildian, which is spelled Guildeon. So It is a book about guilds overcoming various clashes and wars throughout a interesting fictional universe. But yeah, any questions y'all have, I'm more than happy to try and answer them. I can't say I have all the answers, but if I don't know, I will let you know. Yeah, so this dude's coming along all right. You can see I just like to work my way down kind of from the head, and I will block things in very basically. I'm not really going into crazy detail, but I will infer what details I kind of want later. So he might have some knuckle dusters on, for example, but otherwise you kind of start with like mittens as far as hand construction goes. Yeah, just kind of chilling and drawing on a stormy day. Kind of exciting to draw more in public as opposed to just secretly in the sketchbook sometimes. And again, I'm trying to build these external systems of accountability. The Chainsaw Maniac, what's good, dude? How you doing? Just sketching here, just chilling, hanging out. Actually, I'm trying to get used to streaming, so we're still kind of in the early phases of that. And checking the stream dashboard, learning how to do all that jazz. So appreciate you guys for bearing with me while I kind of get a handle on the process here. Hopefully future streams, if this decides to, become a recurring thing, will have much more flow and fluidity and, cool graphics and all that. But yeah, just sketching some characters. Got some reference up on my iPad, which y'all cannot see. Hey, sweet. Yeah, it's always nice to hang out while you draw, especially like if you go to a stream and you either have dual monitors or you're just like working traditionally. That's always really fun. But character sheets, man, those are the juice. I get a lot of energy from character sheets. This dude's head's a little too big. Little too big. There we go. That's better proportion. Let's give him a little more attitude. Lean my guy back a little. And then I'm going to have to adjust the trapezius muscle right there. So yeah, you got to have character sheets if you're working on an anime. Otherwise, your character models will look different from scene to scene. You'd be like, is that the same character? You'd be like, yeah. Why are you asking? Just kidding. Yeah, developing bigger projects is always a fun process, especially if you're going to animate them, I was trying to find some good animes to get into lately. I haven't been on my anime watching game. I think I got another season of Mushoku Tensei to watch. I really was liking Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, but I've been sadly pretty... Oh man, yeah. Fight scenes, dude, those are the best. Just being able to go crazy on the keyframes or animate straight ahead. All I wanted to animate was fight scenes when I was younger. I never wanted to like draw my character sheets. I never wanted to animate the other parts of the story. It was always about the characters getting into a fight. Like, that's all. Because I just wanted to animate that sweet Sakuga. That nasty animation that just gives you chills because it's so good. But I think I heard, who was it? Somebody said fight scenes. I think it was Brandon Sanderson, the author. He gave like a lecture on writing characters and stuff. He's like, fight scenes are really not about like a blow-by-blow description, and he's talking about books, like writing books of fight scenes, but they're more about two ideologies or two conflicts or conflicts between characters or groups clashing is what the fight scene's about. But when it's animated, it's definitely about the blow-by-blow sometimes. But you still got to have those high-intensity emotional moments, where they kind of stop and, you know, think about the characters getting into a fight. Like, that's all. Because I just wanted to animate that sweet Sakuga. That nasty animation that just gives you chills because it's so good. But I think I heard, who was it? Somebody said fight scenes. I think it was Brandon Sanderson, the author. He gave like a lecture on writing characters and stuff. He's like, fight scenes are really not about like a blow-by-blow description, and he's talking about books, like writing books of fight scenes, but when it's animated, it's definitely about the blow-by-blow sometimes. But you still got to have those high-intensity emotional moments, where they kind of stop and, yell at each other for a little bit about the plot, and then keep hitting each other. So, what are you using to animate? Are you animating in Clip Studio? You're going to animate it in like Toon Boom? Man, my guy's pose is so stiff. That's all right, we're just warming up. Okay. And then we got a little perspective issue here too. Oh yeah, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. That is a really dope series. I think I was watching the one with his daughter on Netflix for a little bit. That show is crazy, man. Crazy like this kind of askance perspective I got to keep on checking on. Probably wouldn't come that far off the shoulder. Oh, Blender, nice. Yeah, I love Blender. I haven't delved into all that it can do, but I usually use it just for like more poly modeling purposes. But I haven't done a lot of 2D at all in Blender. I'm really not that good with the grease pencil. I was doing a lot of animation in, what is it, Procreate, but Procreate's timeline is kind of wanting. And I've seen people do amazing stuff in Blender. But yeah, that's really cool. It's so sick that that's freeware, Back in the day, you had to like steal Macromedia Flash or something to try and animate. Or I was animating on like PDAs or personal digital assistants, like Palm Pilots. Those were crazy times. Yeah, I went to school for 2D animation, but ended up doing more concept art for most of my career so far. I'd say it's like 60% concept art, 40% illustration. Yeah, it's the hands that are weird. Shaking this rust off, everybody. So, yeah, you guys can feel free to drop links to your work in the chat if you want. If I have time later, I'll check them out, or on the replay, somebody might find you and follow your projects. That's always a really good feeling. Yeah, I don't have a lot of rules at this point. Everybody's very chill and cool, so. Let's figure out where we got these little straps floating around, and if I even want them. Do we want too many of those? We shall see. So yeah, again, if you guys have any questions about drawing, or you want to talk about your projects or what you're doing, or questions in general, I'm happy to field them as I'm just kind of sketching here, I am streaming, but this is a community activity. All right, I'm digging that. That's a solid sketch. I've been really trying to be more mindful lately about finishing stuff, but how finished do you make a sketch, right? Like, it is a sketch by definition. We can always plan like more final stuff, but you want to make sure that you're also making time to like experiment and explore. And it'd be really fun to do some Blender animation streams sometime if I could learn the grease pencil. Maybe make some courses. I mentioned it earlier, but I live in Florida in the US, and we're kind of in stormy season, so if I end the stream, it's because we have like a tornado watch or a tornado warning, and I gotta just stay on top of that. But people seem to be pretty chill about it around here. I come from Minnesota, where we take our tornadoes more sincerely. I don't know if Floridians are just like, but I'm learning. So what I'm doing right now is just trying to add a little extra shading to certain areas. Hey, what's up, Wesso? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Happy to have you here. Again, just sketching. Anybody can feel free to chime in, chat, ask questions, whatevs. We're just hanging out here. Hopefully getting some inspiration, getting some juice back. No tornadoes in South Africa. Well, that's nice. That's nice for you. We have hurricanes and tornadoes here in Florida. But I bet you got other crazy stuff in South Africa. I bet you got some crazy animals or something. But man, South Africa, that's cool. You got people tuning in from the Netherlands, from India, from South Africa. That's pretty wild. Aaron Brown asks, do you know how one would start thinking about building a style guide for characters in games? That's oh, cool. We got North Africa too. Very cool. Let me see, Aaron. Let me think about that for a second. So, style guide for characters in games. Well, if you are doing an indie dev project, I would most certainly consider the overall style of the game. It depends on what your role is in that project. If you're like the lead designer and you're going to get people to like animate it or hand it off, you always want to be as clear and distinct as possible about the shape design of the characters, the overall aesthetics of the world. The more time you spend drawing and refining that into a pretty cohesive thing, the more it'll be clear to others because you'll have a clearer idea about it. For example, if I was going to turn Gildian into a game and it was like an open world type thing where you like make your own character and just kind of interface with the world, I'd spend a lot of time sketching, a lot of time just. I think the core of it is the shape language, though. That's what I would focus on first and foremost, like for lack of a better term, the style. So shape language could be very simplified depending on the type of game, or it could be, more realistic. Like a game like Dragon's Dogma or Skyrim is going to look different than, a World of Warcraft, for example, because you have very stylized shapes versus like more realistic shapes. You want to get like general broad color palettes. It just depends on how involved you want to get, how big the scope of the game is, what your role in the pipeline is. But for putting together a style guide, um, draw all the characters in, maybe draw one or two characters in a couple different styles, and then I would go ahead and pick the styles you like best for those characters and start to flesh out the world that way. So start where you're strong and make those really, really good, and then work on the areas that you maybe need a little more help in, but with the established style of the really well done characters. That's kind of what I would do if it were a game I was developing. All right, so he's looking pretty cool. Let me see. Maybe make some more room for myself here. Maybe I'll work on this drawing of Celia a little bit. But yeah, style guides are really fun. Basically, you want to make sure that it's nice and clean, and yeah, for sure. Hope that was helpful. You just want to make sure it's like clean and well presented. I would definitely have it in like PDF format, and I would try to just make everything as clean as possible for handing it off so people really get it. Of course, if you don't mind them asking you questions like your 3D modelers or your art directors, then that's fine too, and they probably will have questions regardless. But yeah, start where you're strong, get that stuff looking really good, and then start to flesh out, little environment pieces, little buildings and the shape design of buildings and stuff. Of course, you can always go and check out, your favorite game concept art and get an idea of how they're handling that. That's also a really good thing to do. Like I love to look at art books by some of my favorite Japanese games like Final Fantasy Tactics or Tactics Ogre. I love those styles particularly. Because there's games where I really love the game too, and I don't really like the art that much, which is kind of funny. Like I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the Dark or Demon Souls remaster art, but it I'm not like dogging it or anything. It's just not my taste. But I love how the actual game looks. It really will depend on the 3D people you're working with or the the team you hire. A lot of moving pieces to consider there. See, Wesso says that you'd like to specialize in more hard surface design. Do you have any recommendations, like learning how to design mechs, complex mechanical structures, etc.? That is a fantastic question, Wesso, and I hope I'm, getting your name right, or your gender as well. I can never tell online, so. Fuchs has said they love the Valorant art, but the game doesn't look that fun, and I am right there with you. I'm a huge fan of that art. It's gorgeous, but not so much into the actual gameplay and aesthetics of the game itself, which is sometimes the case too. There's art I love to look at, but I would never want to make, and there's games where I love the art and the game is like, eh. Anyway, to answer your question, Wesso, I would start with Scott Robertson's How to Draw book. It's a great book for all that left brain, heavy mechanical, perspective-based drawing. And I would just absolutely go all the way through that. Even if you don't read a ton of it at first, just draw the exercises over and over so that your hand understands those lines and how to construct that stuff in perspective. Start to make more complex cubes, more complex spheres that work in perspective, and start to analyze and understand machines. Save a bunch of machines into Pinterest boards and sketch those both freehand and with perspective grids. And eventually that stuff starts to solidify in your imagination. And then complex structures and mechs will come naturally to you. You'll start to understand the big shapes and their proportions that lead down to the medium shapes and the small shapes. Now, I personally love mechanical design, but I haven't done a lot of it. Just because I kind of picked my focus and I got hired to do a lot of characters throughout my kind of freelance. So I just didn't get a chance to work on a lot of robot stuff, but I did have a couple robot indie games that I got to work on, which were really cool, and I always really enjoyed it. But it just doesn't come around very often. At least it didn't for me. But oh man, you gotta have those delicious mechs and awesome mechanical designs and structures. Still just kind of free sketching here, by the way. What are some other games you guys really like the art of? And why do you like it? And do you like the game as much as you like the art? That's the million-dollar question right there. Again, just kind of doodling. I'm doing some gestures, sometimes just trying to push my figures a little bit. Again, this is super like comfort zone for me. Excuse me. It's like, yeah, no problem, Wesso. Once perspective becomes second nature to you, you'll just get nastier and nastier in terms of what you're able to do. I think about perspective a fair bit, but I could definitely go in on it much harder. Like for example, there's already like really bad perspective mistakes in this, but only because I'm now like hyper conscious of it. So for example, if we're starting with the eye line, like right here, then I'll go ahead and drop all of that. I'm gonna just work with 1 point perspective, so we'll place the point like behind her somewhere. Just jut some lines out here. But yeah, perspective is so integral. I devote only like enough to use it in the beginner drawing course, like 1, 2, and 3 point perspective, but it's something you just have to dig into and dive hard for because it will pay massive dividends in your art very early on. Let's see, we got some more chat action here. Chainsaw Maniac want to specialize in fight choreography for animation. Senior animator, mostly in 3D, dabble in 2D for a couple of years now. That's awesome. That's a great specialization. And specialization is so key for the industry. You don't want to be everything to everybody. I mean, unless you're like super well connected and you want to be more of a director level person. But if you want to be doing the work and executing it, you should have your zone of genius. By all means, that's really cool that you've already found it in 3D. Yeah, and then Wesso says, do you think there is as much demand in the industry for hard surface design compared to characters? Yes, absolutely. Again, with the specialization aspect, you are going to have far more work than somebody who is in a higher competitive niche like characters, most likely. If that's all that's in your portfolio is mechs and tanks and complex mechanical structures that look believable that you could hand off to a 3D modeler, then it's. I mean, I can't guarantee anything. There's so many factors, but logic dictates that if you're like absolutely killer at that stuff, like it's in so many games, so many movies, so many like applications for learning to do hard surface stuff. It's probably one of the more underserved niches, I'd say, just from like a glance at all of the stuff I see on Instagram or Pinterest or ArtStation. It's definitely one of the more underserved niches is hard surface stuff. But if your vehicles are killer, if your mechs are awesome, then you're gonna get work. And then Fuchses says Apex Legends stands out. The game is also fun, but then again, EA. I guess EA has a bit of a reputation, huh? Once those studios get kind of big, you can see them kind of compromise in some areas, but it's hard to move a machine that big. And by a machine, I mean a company that big. You know, there's a lot going on with decision making and just tons and tons of different considerations. So sometimes they make consideration, or not make considerations, they consider the bottom line more than they consider how that's going to affect the player base or what have you. You know, there's some short-sighted stuff going on there. I don't know too much about it right now with EA, but I know Apex was fairly awesome. I watched a lot of that gameplay when it first came out. All right, just sketching, again, sort of that thief cat girl character Celia from the back. And Fuchses also says, if I wanted to be a character concept artist, would it be better to start with a general portfolio, like with environments and props as well as characters, for example? And then Misty Shadows is asking, do I have a favorite project I have worked on? So I'm going to start with Fuchses. I'm probably butchering that name and I apologize. But I err on the side of specialization these days if you want work. I will say that characters are the most heavily competitive niche. So you're going to have to find a way to stand out there. And I can't give you that. It's going to, unless like we're working one-on-one together. It's like you'd really have to consider your style, your proclivities, what makes you unique and applicable to the studio, and how to really make that shine. I would definitely say if you're trying to just get in, Wild Blue Studios has great streams on Twitch. Wild Blue Studios, they do really cool streams on what different companies look for in terms of portfolio. And sometimes you will have to be more of a generalist. It really just depends. Everybody's path is different. A lot of it is who you know and how polished your stuff is. But if you really want to go the route for characters, it still is a connections game, meaning you're going to want to be understanding and kind of in the inbox or in the general social media profiles of people who can actually give you work for that kind of thing. You know, whether that's art directors or certain studios where you really love the style and you know that there might be enough turnover in that studio for you to find your place. Because some artists, you know, it's not easy to get a studio position, for one, and two, there's usually not a lot of turnover. So I would say start with watching some Wild Blue Studio streams if you're looking for general concept art advice and how to get into that. You can always find like little gigs on Reddit and, you know, probably like a C-class gig on ArtStation or something, where you can pay your bills and learn, but you have to absolutely like kill it and start going to different like portfolio building conventions like Lightbox, where you'll really start to connect with people who are really doing it and can give you some more direct advice than I can on that. Um, but yeah, if you really want to rock characters, then you're just obviously gonna have to do tons and tons of gesture drawing, tons and tons of like head to toe character design, turnarounds, um, props and stuff are key too on characters. I wouldn't go as far as environments, but I would definitely do some killer props and potion bottles and all that good stuff because that stuff is really applicable um, to different studios and what they're looking for. You know, you might get in by doing UI art in the beginning instead of characters. Um, and yep, Wesso, they do portfolio reviews. Wild Blue does do that. Let's see. Do you have a favorite project? Yeah. So my favorite project I've ever worked on is Gildian. I mentioned it earlier in the stream. That's where these characters are from that I'm sketching. And Gildian is the book that I've recently written. I have 5 of them outlined, but the first one is in the second draft. There's about 430 pages. I'm submitting them to literary agents now, along with an art book I'm making with it. So Gildian is essentially just a fictional universe where tons of different guilds from F to S rank, I mean not really F rank, like basically D to S rank, go on adventures and do a whole bunch of cool stuff in a really interesting world with an interesting like spell system. And I started it way back in college, and I just kind of fell in love with the whole world I was building. So I just continued it, and now the book is done, and I just keep sketching and designing the characters for that project. And you guys will probably see more of that emerging as I continue to like stream and develop more of that. So Gildian's my number 1 project. I also love my other project, which is more of a one-shot that I'm going to write a book for and maybe do a comic, which is Satellite Psychic Saga. It's much more of a, I guess, Evangelion-esque kind of thing, except without the giant robots. It's more about like psychic powers and crazy, like interstellar happenings that cause those things to occur. So I have a lot of IPs I've cooked on. My last one I'll talk about is Strategus, which is the game I want to develop that's kind of close to my heart in terms of Final Fantasy Tactics. Just kind of a tactics-esque game with really cool characters and worlds. So those are the 3 that I kind of constantly develop visuals for and other stuff too as I get more kind of artwork built up for those. I also think about like design docs and when I'd have the capital and which one to work on when. So I'm kind of in the process of balancing all that stuff out with my full-time job. But yeah, Fuxies, happy to provide a little direction there. Wesso said facial expressions. Oh, peace out, Wesso. Thanks for joining the stream for a little bit. Facial expressions, costume design iterations are really important for character design. Super important. Look at the stuff they did for Arcane, for example, if you really want to see some very cool stuff in that regard. Jason Chan to this day is one of my favorite concept artists, and he does a lot of that. Chainsaw Maniac said connections are pretty good for getting into studios, especially the bigger ones. Yeah, the chances of you getting in just by your work alone are improbable. At the very least, I'll put it that way. It's improbable. You really want to know people. And they should know your work. They should have maybe helped guide your work to the studio's direction. You know, you meet them in person, build a personal connection after already having done a fair amount of work. There's a reason why all this stuff is like so coveted, these studio positions, and it's because it's not a straightforward path usually for most artists, and that's okay. Like again, I found I do take commissions. I do some of that stuff, and I did make my full-time living as an artist for about 10 years, but like people just pay me way more to be a marketing operations specialist. And luckily I work for an engineering company, so I do a lot of 3D modeling to help showcase what our products do. And I love engineering and mechanical design stuff. I don't draw a lot of it, but I model a lot of the stuff. So, and that is just, you know, comparable with what you get paid at a studio. So you don't always get to do exactly what you want for work, but you can always have your own projects where you control kind of the world and the layout and all that neat stuff, which is really fulfilling and really cool. So this is kind of a little more like her beast mode, you know, kind of like a Bloody Roar type thing if you guys ever played that fighting game throwback. All right, that's kind of cool. Let's, should we do a little more refined of a drawing now that we're kind of warmed up here using that 1-point perspective grid? We have her here, we have kind of an alternate take there. It's almost like they're looking at each other. I didn't even intend to do that, but this is out of perspective for that. Yeah, maybe we'll do one more drawing that's a little more complete. These are all fairly sketchy, and that pose, not super happy with that. Yeah, I love it, Chainsaw Maniac. That's me too. Like, you got to do what you got to do. Pay those bills, get that health insurance, get that paper, you know, buy a house, support your family, all that good stuff. But when you got the time and the inkling and the resources, go in, make it happen. Like, supply and demand is very real when it comes to what we do. And in order to get that paper, sometimes you don't get to do exactly what you want to do. I'm going to make a more finished drawing of this dude on the side here. I'm just checking my reference for some different costume design ideas. Let's see, so yeah, what I will say for all of your projects that you're working on, have a deadline for each area of it, or they'll go on forever. You know, you got to have like, okay, I'm going to have the character art done by, you know, the end of the year. Then first quarter of next year, I'm going to, you know, get the design Bible together or whatever. So make sure that you're setting deadlines or stuff will just not happen. I mean, it'll happen, but it will happen really scattered. You got to think about what you actually need for the project and what's going to move the needle to more complete. Like when I was writing a book, I'm like, okay, I have this whole outline. I have, you know, 30 something chapters to get through. I roughly outline what happens in the chapters, and then I just write. And then it's like I know how many chapters I have left. I know if they're connecting up well enough together. I just had a clear direction. I'm like, okay, well, we're going to be done by the end of the year. And I was. So I like to think of it in 12-week years. As a great book called The 12-Week Year, and you kind of like sprint for 3 months really hard at a goal. Up to 3 goals, but probably 1 when you're just getting used to setting goals. It's a muscle like drawing. I'm going to probably zoom in a little bit on the character here. And then you take those 3-ish months, you know, those 12 weeks, and you just whoop up on it every day. You stay focused, you know where you're going, you have a general outline, you have a specific and measurable goal, and that permits you to begin to make real progress in the direction of your projects. Because you want to get them to the point where everybody else can see them and appreciate them. Because otherwise, you just goes on in perpetuity. It's kind of very distracted, very scattered. And I'm super guilty of that. Like, I do a lot of stuff. You know, I got the beginner drawing course, 2nd edition. The 12-week version has been sitting unfinished for months while I mess with music and do 3D modeling and work on my book and practice coding. But it's like, you know, that's just my brain partly. And the other part is you just sometimes have to get fed up enough to actually start setting more clear and concise deadlines with yourself. Yeah, exactly. It's like you're just okay, well, I'll just get a little bit better, a little bit better. And even when you're not giving yourself like a clear direction of what kind of better, then it's like this sort of broad general I'm just doing it getting better. You know, it's like you don't set out to get better at driving, right? But you get slightly better at driving over time. Hopefully most of you are safe drivers. And you don't really like say, I'm going to get better at braking smoothly, or I'm going to get better at accelerating smoothly, or I'm going to get better at you know, turning while staying in the lanes really cleanly. You don't really set those goals, but you get, you know, marginally better at them over time. But if you set those goals and you're conscious of them and you're deliberately practicing, then you start to see real results in a short amount of time, and you get the dopamine from that. You get the excitement from that. Um, if you're tracking how much weight you lift, and you lift 5 more pounds this week than you lifted last week, then you're making real progress, measurable progress. So it's really similar when you're working on your projects, and Chainsaw knows what's up. But yeah, it also helps to have some sort of community where it's natural. My ear's tiny. Where it's natural to measure your progress and to share that with others. Because again, otherwise, it tends to fall into zones of I'm getting a little bit better and I enjoy doing this, but I'm not actually making the progress I'm capable of making. Which again, it's not easy to be hard with yourself. You have to sometimes be a little tough on yourself. Not like in a beat yourself up kind of way, but like okay, I'm up at 5 a.m. to do 2 hours of work before I go to work kind of way. By hard, I mean disciplined and actually taking into account what it's going to take, because usually it's more than you think. All right. I'm surprisingly feeling pretty comfortable with the drawing now that it's starting to flow a little more. I mean, these are all obviously super sketchy, and I'm going to have more clear examples rather than just warming up next time. But I just wanted to get into the habit. I'm so glad you guys came out, said hey, asked questions. Helps me to get my brain percolating. And I always try to give the most kind of actionable advice that I can so that you don't feel like it's not really worth it or like you get stuck. But, that stuff happens. We all get stuck sometimes. It's okay. But you want to check in. One thing I've been wanting to do for a while is I have a server started in Discord where you can have your own threads, like it's a forum, and just have people work on one project at a time and report their progress on that project. But it's something where I'm going to have like a trial period for it, just because I don't know how easy or hard that's going to be to run. And I really want to make sure that people would get value out of it and they would actually chime in and be working on their stuff, because I know how hard it can be to focus in when you need to, when life is so distracting. But that's something that is just helpful, because not only would it be, kind of a challenge to run it, but running it and completing all the projects I'm working on might not be super easy. So we'll see about that soon-ish, if I'm going to actually launch it or not. I might do a beta version of it. I'm just trying to shake stuff up with BDC because it's been nice, to just kind of work on a little bit here, a little bit there over the years, but I haven't really carved out a clear niche with it. It's like, oh yes, it's the beginner drawing course, but it's hard to work on beginner stuff all the time, and it's not like naturally what I'm best at. I'm better at explaining, complex, comprehensive concepts, and yes, simplifying them, but and I can get people past the beginner stage for sure, but I gotta have some stuff besides the Art Maxion bundle to start helping people get to those next levels they're looking for, whether it's completing their projects or finding some of those softer skills like the discipline to actually follow through on some of the things you want to do with the skills you're building. So it's not super easy, again, having a full-time job, juggling a lot of projects, but it's all worth it, to be able to create cool communities and make it so that we're all kind of building things that we care about and get to share those things with each other and the world, hopefully. And sometimes those things turn into money, and that's super cool too. It's not like the goal, but when you can release something you've worked very hard on and you're very proud of, and even though there's things you change, and people are like, yeah, I'll give you $50 for that, or oh, the limited edition signed copy, yeah, $200, or oh, it's a book for $15, soft cover, yeah, totally, and you sell 1,000 of those, that's awesome, Looks like we had another question from Fuxes. Would you say copying other artists is good practice? Is there an optimum way to do it? Because I feel like I'm just doing it wrong because nothing's really sticking. It's an excellent question. So, this is probably an ugly take, and watch this get me semi-canceled, but I'm not using this for professional work, but I took the drawings I did and I threw them through AI so that I'm kind of seeing what the next levels of finish look like for my own work, the styles that I've already developed. And then I don't actually use the tags of the other artists. I know, like, algorithmically, they're trained on artists, obviously, but I just look at what it outputs and I try and beat the AI. And that's the game that I play with myself, is like, okay, it's got some really cool outputs based on the characters I've given it, my own characters that I've drawn, mixed with all of the, stuff that it's doing. How can I make that better? The hands are all messed up, or the shapes don't make sense here, or like the eyes are crossed. So that's what I do in order to improve these days. When it comes to copying other artists, it's a tough one because I've seen artists that are phenomenal and were developing their own style become juniors, for lack of a better word, of really amazing artists. Like, I've seen people become juniors of the late Kim Jong-hee or Akihiko Yoshida, for example. Or there's people trying to chase Frank Frazetta too hard. I would say that when it comes to developing your own stuff, you have a multiplicity of experiences and a nervous system that nobody can replicate. So you want to lean into that as much as you can for your own work, which is your own uniqueness. And yes, like, when you're deliberately looking at their stuff, like, I like these shapes, I like this coloring style, I like this way of handling edges, then practice that. Like, for example, one of my favorite artists recently is Yu Ming Lee. And I just love the way that they create really gorgeous edge work and brush work, but I'd never want to fully replicate that sort of dreamy, nocturnal, kind of astral style, but there's elements of it I like. So when I do studies of their stuff, what I'm trying to look at is, well, how do they think about color? How are they, using different edges to transition form? Why do they choose this type of brushwork? So it's really more about asking yourself questions and not just copying mindlessly, because that happens a lot. That happens a ton. And in the beginning, you'll still get some mileage out of it, right? It's not like you're not going to be getting better, but you can, like you noted yourself, you're going to be feeling like, oh, I'm only getting, you know, a little bit better. But yeah, you've already said, like, just not trying to steal one style, but how do you do certain things? Like, if you like the way that I construct heads, like, I learned that from Loomis and from George Bridgman, and then I made it my own. But these are teachers, so these are people who give you those templates to work with. And that's super duper helpful because they're actually breaking it down in ways that make it easier to quote unquote steal it, but it always becomes your own over time. So yeah, it goes back to deliberate practice. It goes back to asking yourself the right questions and creating the right drills from those questions. So, if I want to understand how Yu Ming Lee uses color, then I will, sometimes I'll create a palette out of it and I'll start to take down the different color samples, and then I'll use those colors in a painting abstracted from what I've broken down. I'll say, well, why is this working or not working, and here's how they applied them here, and this is what part of the value they apply the color to. And so it's a long process to actually take something from another artist and make it your own, but in the end it does become yours. The same way as, like, if you play a ton of cover music, you're never going to sound completely like the people you're covering, but you'll learn so much in the process that can be applied to your own thing. Like, my wife's brother did a lot of Beatles covers, and now his stuff doesn't really sound too Beatlesy at all, but it's his, and the chords he learned, the ways he learned to write songs, the ways he learned to sing are all improved because of how long he spent understanding what they were doing and how he applied it to the work that he's doing. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers the question. It comes down to deliberate practice
based on asking yourself the right questions from their style. And it could be, again, the way they draw eyes, the way they construct figures, the dynamic aspect of their poses, how their lines look. And then once you create those drills, you start to implement them in ways of like, okay, I'm going to do this for 25 minutes every other day and watch the improvement. So that's kind of what I've done over the years. And like I said, I use AI these days, not to like feed anybody else's art to it. I just feed my own art to it. And then it spits out stuff that I either like or don't like. I ask myself why, and then I try to beat the AI. Better poses, better hands, more deliberate marks, all of that. So that's kind of how I've tried to keep myself up to date on like the next levels of my style because it's good for simulating. It's not good for finish. It's not good for a lot of things, but it is a tool. And I'm somebody who believes in, utilizing tools in the appropriate ways. You wouldn't hit people with a hammer unless you're defending your life, but it's great for a lot of things. You can pull nails out of boards, etc. So, all right, we've just been skirting the top of the picture plane for the last 20 minutes. Let's probably move them down a little bit. Yeah, so hope that was helpful to understand kind of how I approach it, how I learned to kind of put a bunch of styles into the style you see today. But yeah, I'm just enjoying sketching today. I probably won't do anything super finished. We'll maybe do one more drawing and wrap the stream up, just because it was sort of impromptu and not super planned, but it's been really fun. Again, can't thank you guys enough for the questions, for the participation, for the engagement, keeping me honest with the drawing aspect here. Let's see. I'm drawing some Celia, drawing some Balian. I think I want another full body pose. Let's do a full body figure. Yeah, no, it's been an awesome chatting, you guys. Like I said, I'm going to do one more drawing here based on some of these character things I'm already kind of establishing. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to make a copy of that so I can shrink it down and not lose the original resolution. I'm going to flip him over. Maybe, we'll see. But yeah, that's how I like to use AI. Midjourney's Niji mode is very good for kind of that hybrid Eastern Western style that I've kind of cultivated, especially when you set it to expressive mode. So again, I love new tools. I have a hard time not picking up new tools. There's an engineer in me that just loves efficiency, that loves doing more with less. And obviously that engineer sometimes doesn't make his way into my line work, but you guys know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I can't speak to any of the, ethical issues or other industry issues facing AI at this point. I'm just telling you how I use it. I'm not going to weigh in on some of those other aspects. I just use it to kind of teach myself and learn the next levels. Some of its polish is really cool. I particularly love the way that it's learned to do lighting, especially without rendering everything to death. Not that there isn't a place for that, because there totally is when you want to go all the way in on like a really hyper polished illustration. But you definitely want to know how to make something look good and done without spending 70, 80, 50 hours on it sometimes. So, all right, what I'm doing here, ladies and gentlemen, is establishing the pose. And I think my canvas is big enough where if I shrink this guy down, it's not going to be a big deal. And I'm just doing it with shapes I've learned to draw time and time again in perspective, simplified shapes that once you get the big shape right, usually turn out pretty favorably. See, now I can already tell that's too close to his body, and the reason why I did it too close to his body is because I don't want these things to touch. So you can feel like you got enough room on your picture plane, but sometimes you just kind of don't. Move this guy over. I don't need to see every little detail of him in order to um, reference it, so just make him a little smaller here. Oh, that's the whole canvas. Whoops. Edit. Transform. Such as his layer. There we go. Let's see. Chainsaw says, if I can figure out a way to use AI to duplicate myself like 5 times, I'll have my own animation team. Exactly. Like, that's what I'm thinking about is not how can I avoid paying people, but how can I do more of what I'm doing because there's only one me. I'm not thinking like a studio exec like, yes, how can my bottom line get thicker? How can I make more money and pay less artists? No, that ain't it. If I had more money, I'd pay more artists. But it's more about, okay, well, I can do this really well. What can it do to fill in my skill gap? Or how can I learn to do it with this? And 3D AI is sort of interesting right now. Like there's there was like a I don't know if you've seen this, but there was a tool that lets you like generate a texture based on description on your meshes in Blender. I didn't get too deep into that, but that looked really cool. I wonder if that's made any headway in terms of development, because that was looking sweet. Like, you don't have to go and necessarily find all these texture maps and apply them in every single channel and create all these custom parameters just to make it look good. That would be awesome. You just like block mesh in a whole brick wall or something, and then it like lines up every brick. That'd be so easy, instead of going and doing all the UVs and all this other stuff. But still, it's always good practice. You shouldn't. The thing is if you don't know how to do it too, then that's when you run into lots of trouble, because then you can't manually adjust it. Like, I've coded some things myself, and then there's times I've just like taken Python code from I don't know what's the website, Stack Overflow or something, and I'll just like copy and paste it in, and I can't edit it that well because I don't understand why it works the way it does, because I haven't spent the time, I haven't paid the dues. So that's like the big problem that people will constantly run into when they're trying to like cheat it, or just use something that isn't going to help them actually achieve the result they're after if they can't modify it. So while the technology is very exciting, it's not quite to the point where you don't have to know a fair amount to actually make something flush and make something workable. A lot of time people will make some things that look cool with AI, but they could never get a certain pose, or they could never make a hand that articulates in the way they're looking for to tell the story. See, I saw a tool that corrects muscle and bone movements in 3D, so you just set the keyframes and AI fills in the rest. Yeah, that's pretty sweet, because that's some heavy-duty work, like those transformations and making sure that those work on the mesh. I mean, weight painting, or sometimes you got like blended transformations too. It's a lot of work, and again, it's the core of it should be to like let us do more of the fun part, not take over the entire process. Like, I just want to have more time to do the cool stuff. Yeah, I got to look into more of the 3D AI. Like, that's one thing like a tech artist does too. Like, I'm sure you're probably already familiar with this, Chainsaw, but tech artists are like partially coders. They're creating manual tools to create better workflow in the entirety of the pipeline for the games they're working on. Like you said, like instead of creating every single chain link in a chain, it's like a a tool that just meshes it all together for you with perfectly optimized game geometry. Um, that's the kind of stuff that I get really jazzed about because, I mean, you can just get so much more done, and production is already so costly. But we're always going to be doing some of it. You can't escape. Um, you can't escape everything. You know, there's no paradise to escape to use a quote from Berserk. Yeah, yeah. It's like I can kind of understand some code. I've messed with some Python. You know, I've picked up and opened a couple books, but it's like putting in the hours. I totally fully haven't. Um, but it's nice to have some knowledge of it, especially if you want to do like games or optimizing features for something you might be working on later. You might even be able to code your own plugins for software. Like Blender is really friendly with that, to my knowledge. Maybe more so than other 3D applications. Just trying to do some little corrections here. Hopefully, if things are going in the right direction, the corrections get smaller and smaller. But yeah, kind of just fleshing out more of this character. Design style and whatnot. Yeah, way too far zoomed out to start working on facial feature stuff. This is about proportions right now. Okay, we're getting there. The urge is to like make the character bigger, but we ran out of canvas. I think this should be enough space if I zoom into 100%. So you can just start with the big shape of the head, lay in some quick facial features. Oh. Yeah, yeah, that'd be sick. Coloring animation takes forever. Like you got these really awesome, you know, rough keyframes, or even you've done the line art, and then you got to like sit there and do every little fill. Then you got to do every little shadow on every frame and every little, and it's like, yeah, there's an art to it, and I mean, but it's still expensive time-wise. There's no denying that it takes time. But yeah, definitely more of that. Like, free the people up who do that unless they really, really love it to do something that's even better. Technology should obviously serve the people first, but the way that the market works, the way that um, isolated groups of inventors or people who work on creating some of these things work is that it doesn't really end up serving people, even if they designed it to. It always ends up kind of disrupting things. But I mean, that's kind of the nature of the world, though. What are you going to do? All right. But yeah, animation, man. Let's talk about that for a second. I absolutely enjoy some Sakuga. Like, I'm trying to think of some. Like, I haven't seen animation as good as Demon Slayer in some time. Kimetsu no Yaiba has some of the best animation I've seen in like a decade, but I haven't really been searching that hard for it. My Hero Academia has some pretty sick stuff too, though. These are just the more popular ones, so they kind of got the budget for it. Um, Blender has some shadow modifiers that help with shading as well. Multi-frame fill, yes, that's the kind of stuff that really helps to augment that workflow. Gotta gotta keep it clean. Spend time on the stuff that really is going to add value. My guy looks like he lost a lot of weight. He's a little bit skinny, head's a little big. He's a bit nerdier proportion, but watch this, y'all. You make the head smaller, everything seems bigger. He seems taller, a little more proportionate.
Yeah, you got to be real careful with stuff like that. Head size is something we always use to judge the rest of the figure. All right. Yeah, all right, probably gonna wrap up in about, now the head's too tiny and the neck is too small. Probably gonna wrap up in about 5-ish minutes here, but I wanna thank everybody for coming to chill. It was really, really fun. I love talking art, talking shop, trying to be helpful if I can in some regard. But yeah, everything, 2D, 3D, animation, illustration, concept art, just give it all to me, man. It's the juice. That's why we do what we do. But obviously we have our zones of genius, our areas of specialization. But I still got the problem that I kind of want to do most of it. The only thing I don't want to do is code, like seriously code. But I like the rest. If you guys could have one art superpower, what would it be? If you were like to, this, it would kind of cheapen it, you know, to like snap your fingers and you're a master at one thing. What would you choose and why? It's like you wouldn't get the appreciation juice you get of fighting hard for it, obviously. You know, the climb is really worth it, but what would you do with it? Would you just be like an instant anatomy master? Would you, oh, Fuchs has said it. It is anatomy, just 100%. I guess that one does lend itself to a lot of really cool stuff. Yeah, y'all want some anatomy. Everybody's down with the anatomical mastery with the finger snap. Wow, chainsaw agreeing. Okay, okay. I mean, I can see it. Anatomy is really difficult. Um, and when it looks bad, it usually looks pretty bad. I'm there with you on that. Anatomy is a great way to spend those skill points. When in doubt, anatomy it out. Yeah, I think I don't know. I probably would have to say, for me, I would probably choose perspective because drilling it is less fun than anatomy. Um, yeah, exactly. When you're animating, you can only get away with so much of it. I remember seeing some of those Naruto Shippuden fights, man. And it's like, oh, okay, okay. You know, I don't, it's like the pain fight. If you guys know that one, if you're OGs like me, um, some of those frames, woo. And not to say I haven't done my fair share of like frames that look a little sus, but yeah, it definitely shows after a while. You can't get away with everything. But yeah, I choose perspective because if I could rotate anything perfectly and have it line up with and look correct in any perspective, I feel like I would do so much more in terms of challenging what I already know. Maybe I just need to get on stream and drill perspective. Everybody would be like so bored. The chatting would be the only reason everybody's here. You're like, what are you doing with this 3 point grid? Why? But yeah, anatomy's a really good one. Good answer. All right, maybe that's like a younger version of the character. I don't quite know yet. Give him some little tassels and fun stuff. Helps to give a little more dynamism to the design. A little less stiffness. That arm is a little, I mean, this arm's a little thin and might be a little hyperextended. Could get away with it, but I might have to change that. Not bad with perspective, could be better, but decent with it. I hear that. I hear that, chainsaw. That's me too. It's just something that I haven't drilled as much as I've drilled like gesture drawing, anatomy studies, portrait studies. You know, a lot of my stuff was animating frame by frame in the earlier parts of
when I was interested in art. So I go fast when I should probably be slower, more like an illustrator. But I end up just sketching and sketching and sketching, and that's kind of my jam. But perspective, man, that'll change your whole art game. Fuxis says, completely unrelated, want to do 3D animation without interpolation, so stop motion because it's so cool, but they've been putting it off for a while. So yeah, it is really sweet. I think of like, I don't know, oh, Worthy Kids. I don't know how he animates, but his stuff is insane. Um, he's done some cool stop motiony things. That's a super specific way of working too. That takes quite a bit of adjustment and skill building to get it to look right. But just to play around with it would be fun, doing the 3D bouncing ball exercises or something like that. And if you could find a way to optimize the rig where you're really moving it and just like setting another key, it's like you don't have to set up a whole physical space to do that, like they did back in the day, which is crazy. Krugston. I have to look up Krugston after this. I'll take a note from the stream. Let's see. Just gonna fix this face a little bit. I'm having fun now. I don't really want to leave, but I also have human things to do. So, all right, y'all. I guess I'll call it for now. Thanks for coming out to the stream. Much love. I appreciate you. I will see you in the next one. I can't say there's any set schedule for now, but who knows? We might be getting them probably closer to 6 or what time is it? It's 2:21 for me right now. I'm on East Coast time. So when I go back to work next week, I'll probably be home closer to 4, 5-ish. So I'll probably start streaming about 4 hours from whatever time it is now during weekdays for an hour or two, just kind of sporadically until we get into a groove, find some cool stuff. But yeah, thanks for coming to hang out. Always happy to answer questions, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care and have a good day. Happy creating.